It is. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 7 o'clock. Welcome to tonight's Personnel Committee meeting. I hope that we can have a constructive dialogue and conversations. And can I take this opportunity, or be the first one, maybe to wish you all a very happy and also healthy Christmas as well. If we can move on to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and any attendance of substitutes. Helen?
I'm substituting for Councillor Hannah, and Colin Tyswell will be a few minutes late.
Okay, thank you. Just to say, apologies as well, that I'm chairing tonight because Marie can't make it. Her husband has made quite good progress. However, he's had some quite intense treatment today, and I think with the heightened concern of everything that's going up, she thought it better that she would be with him rather than come into the committee meeting tonight. So I wonder, Ruth, whether we could send a note with our good wishes to Hannah, and I think her husband's name is William. I think they made good progress, but she just wanted to be ultra careful at this time. Thank you. Item number 2, any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item number 3, minutes of the meeting on the 28th of September. I will move those from the chair. Is that seconded? All those in favour of the minutes? Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you.
I'm abstaining because we weren't there. I just come out of the hospital.
Okay. Have you got that, Jeremy?
I wasn't either.
Okay. Thank you. Move on to item 4, which is references from the LJCC. The first one, the 4th November, the evaluation and re-evaluation of post policy. The recommendation is there to Personnel Committee that the amended evaluation and re-evaluation of post policy be approved and that there be a review of the 2-tier pay scheme. To get the item started, I will move that. Is that seconded? Thank you, David. It's on page 9. Before I hand over to Ruth, is it Ruth or is it Kevin? Kevin, my understanding is that there are three key bullet points on page 9, and they're dealt with in Appendix 2, which is on pages 13 to 39. The 4th bullet point about scarcity, that's also there as well, and very much the scarcity issue is touched upon in a later report as well. Do you want to add some more substance to that, Kevin? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair, I can introduce the report. So very briefly, members will be aware of this report because it was promised back in June, and that was the point that we introduced, if you recall, the market supplement report, which replaced the scarcity rating report, which is mentioned here. So this is the review of the evaluation and re-evaluation of post policy. The report has already been presented to LJCC and received support of members and the union. Just in summary, the key points to the policy are contained on the change table, and that's Appendix 3. Appendix 1 provides members with some feedback from Project HR. Project HR were an HR consultancy recommended by East Midlands Councils, and the council used Project HR to give an external view of the original policy. In revising the policy then, we've considered the feedback from that piece of consultation from senior management and from our unions. Key changes in the report that's highlighted include the makeup of the JE panel. This will now include a chief officer, up to 2 heads of service, the payroll and job evaluation manager, and also a union representative. The panel will aim to maintain consistent membership, and that's in order to try to improve the consistency of decision making. The appeal process has also slightly changed. That's been adjusted to include the appeal panel being made up of GMT, less the chief officer that's on the original panel, and a union representative as well. A number of other small changes have occurred, and they're all listed in Appendix 3, but I'll answer any questions, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The one issue that I am uncomfortable with is in the makeup of the JE panels, where, as we've heard, it says that that there will be a union representative sitting on each and every panel, and even on the appeal panel. Now, there will be a significant number, or there will be a number of staff employed by Broxtone. It might be useful to know the exact percentage. There will be a number who are not in a union for whatever reason. And I think it not appropriate that someone who has, for whatever reason, decided they don't want any involvement in a union should then have a union representative foisted upon them, both at the initial JE hearing and at any subsequent appeal. And I think any member of staff going in front of that panel or the appeal panel, if they are not a union member, should have the right to say, no, I do not want that person sitting on the panel. I accept that the consistency of the panel, as has been outlined, is an improvement and likely to lead to better decision making, but this is the one area where I have a fundamental disagreement with what is proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Owen, for that. Are there any other comments, questions or observations? Councillor David Watts.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we always knew that the right of the Tory was really anti-union. Sadly, that's never changed. Unions are there to represent employees. The idea that somebody who's having a panel make a decision about them can then vet the members of the panel is nonsense. And equally, having a voice of the employees on that panel is a very good idea. And so I think Councillor Owen, I'm afraid, has completely misunderstood the whole purpose of this. And perhaps if we had less dogma and more policy, it might be sensible.
Philip, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I find it disappointing that yet again Councillor Watts chooses to make a personal attack on me. I think it's very unfortunate, but then we've come to accept that. I'm not suggesting that an employee vets who sits on the panel. That employee that I'm talking about is the one that said, I don't want, for whatever reason, I don't want a union involved in my working life. And just to point out to Councillor Watts that during the whole of my professional working life, I was a member of a professional association or union. So to call me anti-union by way of a derogatory comment is really a nonsense. I stick by the point that I made. If someone is not a member of a union, then the union should not have any say in the job evaluation panel. And they're there to represent employees, yes, but not those employees that don't want them to. And that is the whole point. I've certainly not misunderstood. I've fully understood. And that's why I'm making these comments now.
Thank you, Chair. I think this isn't just about the one individual employee that happens to not be a member of a union. Surely this panel then influences the future employees that may come into that post subsequently. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration in this, in terms of this is not just about that individual employee, but also about the wider organisation and employees who might come into the posts being discussed. So I do think it's important that we have union representation on that panel. Thank you.
I think I would tend to agree with that. Whilst I understand the individual point, Councillor, that you're trying to make, if you look at it the other way, then if the unions weren't there, then you will be excluding them. And the whole point of doing this is to improve the relations with the unions. And And we can pride ourselves as a council, as for many, many years, having very good relationships working with the trade unions and working hand in hand to make improvements, both the staff and the people that we serve. So I would very much want to see them involved and engaged. And I think what Mr. Powell has said has actually enabled that to bring it forward. No one individual will be inhibited or embarrassed by that. It is purely for the better of the council and for all those people who work and contribute and who are involved. Councillor Skinner.
There have been, in my experience, occasions when people have not joined a union for whatever reason, usually an oversight, and they've been very grateful of the support from the union rep when they've needed it. So it works both ways, really, and to have somebody there is really helpful.
Yeah, thanks. Not just to dwell on it for too long. I don't think anyone's anti-union, but I suppose just my question is: would this same process apply for a disciplinary? If I wasn't part of a union, I wouldn't be able to have a union rep on a disciplinary panel, would I? And surely, there are comparisons with this. I think it's about choice. I think what Philip's saying is it's actually empowering that employee whether they have union representation on that panel. I certainly don't think no one's anti-union. We just have slightly different takes on the policy.
My understanding of disciplinary is certainly things that I've been involved in before, that's what trade union representatives are there for members of staff, to actually accompany them and support them. They don't necessarily have to say anything, but they can be there as some moral support in a disciplinary hearing.
I won't refer to the disciplinary, but I'll refer to this policy. A union representative can still attend along with the employee at their hearings. So it would be a different representative than the person that the union rep that would be on the actual deciding panel.
Sorry, can I just come back to this?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But that's the person that they choose to have along with them. So an employee can come to the panel. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Employees aren't obliged to tell us if they're members of a union, so we can't answer that question.
And then any abstentions?
3.
And any against? That is carried, thank you. The next referral item is a flexible retirement policy on pages 53 to 56, and recommended the Personnel Committee that the flexible retirement policy with the suggestions and amendments be approved. I'll move that from the chair. Is that seconded? Thank you, David. Aaron, do you want to take us through this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we've slimmed the flexible retirement policy down by about 80%. Members will, of course, be aware that we are governed by the LGPS scheme and the rules within that for flexible retirement. So in terms of the actual mechanics of the policy, that remains unchanged. So an employee has to be above 55, member of the scheme, and has to reduce their working hours by at least 40%. So those points will all remain the same. We've tried to make this policy a bit more easy for employees to understand. So it's only slightly over 1 page now, and we've just tidied up the time scales which employees have to abide by in terms of their first application to a head of service, which I think the head of service has 28 days to respond to that, and we also have tidied up the appeals process, which is to GMT, and that has to be within 10 days of the original decision being turned down. And in essence, for a flexible retirement to be potentially approved, we've just bullet pointed on there the requirements for that. So in essence, there has to be a robust business plan put forward by the head of service to outline how a flexible retirement can or cannot be supported. Thank you, Chair.
Very quickly, Councillor Tideswell joined us for the start of this item, so we'll be able to vote if he so chooses. Could I just, through you, Chair, ask if Councillor Tideswell has any declarations of interest on the agenda? Do you have any declarations of interest, Councillor? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think anything that makes a policy easier for employees to digest and understand is very welcome. I speak as an NHS employee that has to read a lot of policies. So, yeah, I'm quite happy to support this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. If there are no other questions, sorry, Pat. So, Councillor Pat.
I just wondered whether this would be influenced at any point in the future by the moving the age at which you can access pensions now, aren't they, to 57? I think. I know if it's actually enshrined in a scheme that an earlier age that it's not affected at the moment, but I should imagine that will change at some point. No? No? Okay.
All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous, thank you. The next item is the employee survey report on page 67 to 72. That's the notice report. Ruth, you would highlight them to my left. Sorry, Kevin.
Through you, Chair. At the beginning of 2020, just before the pandemic, we introduced our very first employee survey. And in April of the same year, we introduced our first wellbeing survey to ask how employees were coping, which were extremely different circumstances than the norm. In April and May of this year, we introduced our second survey, employee survey, and we combined it with experience of working through the pandemic. The results have been presented in an infographic in the document for both employees and members, and the aim being to provide the data in a more easily digestible format. In the main, we've received positive feedback, but recognise that this sort of presentation is not for everyone. I'll provide a quick run through, Chair, if that's okay, and then perhaps members may have some questions. We had 206 employees respond, fractionally down on the previous year. On the bottom of page 69 and the top of page 70, members will see how we use the responses from specific questions within the survey to measure the success of two key strategic documents, namely the personnel strategy and the communication strategy. 2 measures captured and reported for the personnel strategy and 4 for the communication strategy. And you can see how well we've done on both of those strategies. Further on page 70, we've highlighted areas where improvements have been made on the previous year. During different engagements leading up to the committee this evening, some members have raised concern regarding the example change in change is managed effectively. While it has improved on previous year, it still needs more work. We recognise that helping employees to accept change initiatives requires good communication, and to assist with that, we've introduced regular weekly employee briefings. But with the technology that we have these days, we know that only 66% of employees are actually reading those weekly employee briefings. So we still have to address the 33% of employees, and we've done that through a number of ways. We've encouraged managers to use the employee briefing that they receive each week to ensure that those messages get across to employees. And we've also introduced a new event, GMT Question Time, where employees can come along, ask GMT questions, and any of the answers are written up and published on the intranet for all employees to see. So it's another opportunity. We've had 2 of those events so far. The last one at the beginning of November was attended by 17 employees, so reasonably well attended. But we recognise there's still work to be done in that area. On page 71, just moving on, we've highlighted some of the areas we want to work on, and members will see that item 3 there is managing change. And under the section you said we did, members will see that GMT question times are one of the things that we said we would improve on, and we've introduced that initiative. Page 72, this section contains the questions regarding the pandemic, and it was good to see an improvement here in the score of how employees were feeling from 6.4 or to 6.4 from 5.9 in 2020. And when we introduced new ways of working back in 2018, 2019, we had very low take-up of flexible working, agile working. But you can imagine through 2020 that increased significantly. And now, in the latest survey, we've got 91% of employees wanting to continue with some degree of home working, which is excellent in terms of the overall outcome for our new ways of working programme. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Before I hand it out, there is one, I think the idea of the of staff coming to GMT question time, I think that is a really, really good idea. Where did that come from, Kevin? Where did the idea come from?
Through you, Chair.
Okay.
Ruth came up
Right,
with that idea.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. On the whole, this makes very encouraging reading. So thank you to everyone who was involved in it. And the layout of the infographic really easy to follow. So I think that's worked very well. I was delighted that we got a 43% return rate, because so often surveys get 5, 10, 2% if we're lucky. We recently had a county-wide consultation from JPAB, which managed to get responses from 0.002% of the population of Greater Nottingham. So this is way, way better than anything like that. There are 1 or 2 worrying figures. A fall of 4% of staff who feel that the council is committed to equality and diversity was very disappointing, and I hope that we'll see that reversed in future years. And less than half of staff felt that change was managed effectively. It is up, but it's still less than half, which was again disappointing. But other than that, some extremely good figures, extremely encouraging. And thank you very much for doing it. I look forward to seeing next year's figures.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not convinced that this infographics, as you call it, is really the best way to present the results. It's all very nice and flashy, but I want to be able to pick out the results in the form of a table, because it's far easier to read. By way of an aside, I'm currently marking exam papers, and the first question is, candidates are presented with a set of results and they've got to present them in an appropriate manner. I can say that this would get no marks at all on the basis of how they've been presented. I made the point last time, if you want to produce it in this pretty form, that's fine, but then I think it would be useful to have a table of results at the end, so that, if you like, an executive summary. Now, I note that Mr. Powell got his defence in first before we had an opportunity to comment on the 3 figures that make, I think, very alarming reading. On page 70, in the first column on the left-hand side, I believe that the general management team demonstrates effective leadership. Not far off half of the employees of this authority don't agree with that. They don't think that the senior management team, the general management team, demonstrates effective leadership. And of course, the success or otherwise of any organisation is really, by and large, provided by the effectiveness of the leadership of that particular organisation. So that it is, I think, of some considerable concern that that is the perception of our workforce, whether they're in a union or not. And the general management team on the right-hand column sets and communicates clear priorities. And we can see there that only 59%, all right, it's over half, but it is only 59% agree with that statement. So our workforce are saying that the senior leadership team, the general management team, don't provide effective leadership, and they don't set and communicate clear priorities. And I suppose probably the two go hand in hand. And really, the one below that, I am valued for what I can offer the organisation. Nearly 40% don't feel valued. Now, I think those are fairly devastating figures. The rest, yes, all right, you may argue that they are wonderful and that's everything is fine, but everything isn't fine. I know there are concerns amongst the staff. For the first time ever in my time as a councillor, I've had a member of staff write to me, they also wrote to Councillor Kerry as well, complaining about the situation in their department, the lack of support, and indeed, a matter that we're going to be coming on to later, the amount that they were being paid. They felt able to complain to us because they're leaving in a fortnight's time. That clearly is their way out of all of this. So I think that in itself is, again, a matter of concern. Now, I noted the comments about members of staff like, in many cases, and want to continue home working. And I've no problems with that as long as it works for all of us. And at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, as an elected member, it is not working effectively for me. Other members may find differently. I find it the devil's own job to get in touch with a member of staff. Phones are not answered. I mean, we had this wonderful new, all singing, all dancing new phone system over the summer, and all our problems were going to go away. Well, I can't say that I've noticed a deal of difference. So whilst I will continue to support the concept of home working, because I think on balance it is a good thing for those that want to do it, it has got to work. It's not home working for the benefit of staff. It's home working for the benefit of the council, but more particularly of the council taxpayer. And as I say, I don't think it's working as effectively as it should at the moment. One last point in closing. This is a survey of staff. It might also be useful to have a similar survey amongst members to see what we think as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I just say on your point about I respect the arguments that you made, but on things like the graphics, you can't win, can you? Because here, there has been a genuine attempt to try and improve and make it more user-friendly. We've been criticised for whatever method, but this has been quite brave, it's been bold, it's been different, and I think we should actually welcome that. For me, reading it, it was much, much clearer. Graphs are fine in some circumstances, but when you can actually see things visible, that can really help as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just highlight with Councillor Owen talking about these figures. It's 57% of the 43% of staff that were surveyed, not the entire workforce. Let's just get a bit of perspective on this. And I understand that in response to that, these quarterly question time meetings were started. So let's see if we get an improvement in that figure in next year's survey. I look forward to seeing the results. I agree with you, Chair. This is much easier for me to digest. Yes, me of blonde hair and simple thinking. And it really stands out. You know, I found it very helpful and I welcome this style of report. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth and then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. First thing I would say is that yes, in future we can provide the table information format as well as the graphical summary. That would suit people who like to see both types of presentation. Secondly, on the issue of the general management team results, the general management team is always seeking to improve, so we're not complacent, and that is why we are constantly thinking of new ways of improving and putting those into practice. The figures there do not include people who were neutral. The range of questions that you could answer: strongly agree, that is this figure, neutral, and then disagree, strongly disagree. So I think you have to bear that in mind as well. I'm not going to be overly defensive about that figure, although I would say that although we in general management team have a reasonable amount of contact with people at all levels in the organisation, some people within the organisation will not perhaps feel that they have intimate knowledge of what we do. Nevertheless, they should feel that we demonstrate effective leadership. So there's clearly more work that we need to do on that front, and we certainly will address that issue. It's one of our areas for improvement going forward.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Skinner, then Councillor Fletcher.
The trend is going up in all areas, so it's encouraging. There's nothing going down, nothing's got worse, everything's getting better, so that must be good.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I mentioned this last year. Actually, I think my problem with the survey is that we don't actually know whether the figures are good in comparison. So, for example, in Gedlin, we may have a figure of 80%, but in Gedlin is at 89%. So, is there anything we can do moving forward that actually puts that into perspective? Because it's all right saying 57% is bad, 80% is good, but we actually don't know, and I don't think anyone in this room can actually hand on heart say it's good.
I'll bring Kevin in at the end to answer these things. Councillor Jill Owen.
Yes, I don't always agree with my husband, but I have to say, this presentation of these figures is a joke. It's the sort of thing our grandchildren would like pictures to look at. They think it was wonderful. But no, there should be in tables, it shouldn't be presented like that. And the second point I wanted to make is on telephone, answering telephones. A lot of people don't answer their telephones, or at least, they don't get... I have to say, one person who does answer his telephone is Mr. Powell there. And there are certain members of staff that you can list, 5, 6, 7, that you can guarantee when you telephone them, they're going to answer the telephone. We have complaints, members of the public, people who've sat literally for hours waiting for the phone to be answered. So I do think something should be done about that. And please, let's have tables.
Okay, I've answered that point. Councillor Lally, Councillor Land, Councillor David Watson. I'm going to pass over to Kevin to round this off. Thank you.
Just as an aside, I do have some concerns about home working. I think, sometimes telephones don't get answers, and it is disappointing and frustrating when you're trying to achieve something. or get an answer for a resident. So is there any way we can monitor that? I'm sure it is being monitored. I hope it is being monitored, because I just get the feeling some people use it as a way of becoming unavailable.
Okay, thank you.
I did want to say that in response, I mean, this survey, you said, you know, organisations are led by, you know, perform with good leadership and stuff like that. But we are actually part leaders of this council. Do we get involved in this at all? I found, I don't know how to put it into sort of detail, but you know, councillors going through a building and people seeing them and being able to talk to people and being aware that councillors are interested in the council and committed to what we do and to deciding policy and doing a degree of leadership. I mean, you end up sort of putting our policies into action. That's your role. You're not so much the visionaries in this organisation as it would be in a private company. So I wondered whether there was any way of involving it, and also bringing the fact that councillors are interested back into the equation somehow. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying. I mean, I deal with the community safety, and community safety senior officers know that I am interested and know that I'm involved. But maybe people who would otherwise see me knocking about don't.
Thank you, Pat. Can I ask Kevin at the end to address all these points? Thank you. Councillor Land.
We've got the Nottingham University Hospitals NHS Trust, the staff survey is currently going on, and I wouldn't be surprised to see similar levels of feelings about senior management, corporate level. The disconnect between staff on the ground can be quite stark at times, because, you know, large organisations, and particularly in this age where people are working from home, if the Owens and other members are struggling to get hold of members on the officers on the telephone, I found him very responsive on email to any queries that I've given, usually addressed within the next working day at the very least, and very helpful. Even when I've managed to frequently email the wrong person, it eventually gets sorted. So I'm very grateful for the swift response that I do get on email. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Philip Owen complained that 57% believe that the general management team demonstrate effective leadership, and said that was just over a half. Of course, 52% of people voted for Brexit, and we were told that was an overwhelming victory. What he didn't mention, and it's perhaps a shame he didn't, is that that's up 7% on last year. The general management team sets and communicates clear priorities, up 11% on last year. And for the council staff saying, I like my job and enjoy working at the council, 80%, that's up 3%. It would have been so interesting to know what that was like in 2019 when the Tories were in charge, because the experience or the impression that we got was that we had a very, very unhappy and demoralised staff when change happened and the council reverted back to the alliance. And so I think these are really encouraging figures. I won't say anything about the hypocrisy of claiming that I'm launching personal attacks and then Councillor Owen immediately beginning by attacking Mr Powell. But I can just assure Councillor Owen, if I ever do choose to launch a personal attack about him, he will be under no illusions about that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. If we could, Kevin, could you answer the substantive points? In particular, I think Councillor Lally made some very interesting points about how as members that we can be involved, how can we set an example, and I think that's for all members, and how maybe that can be incorporated with the staff surveys and consultations that are done in the future. Thank you, Kevin.
Through you, Chair, I think I've made enough notes.
Okay.
Just quickly to go back to Councillor Watt's question with regard to change being managed effectively. 49%, 28% in that instance was neutral. That would create a 77% if we were including neutral responses. But it's clear from my point of view is that we need to ask an additional question. We need to get under the skin of why an individual is neutral. Maybe it's that they haven't been involved in any change in the period that they were being asked about, or it could be something else, and we need to get under that, under the skin of that question. So we intend to ask an additional question to clarify, if neutral, why. And that's going to be exactly the same position for the two that Councillor Owen mentioned, which was the management team, effective leadership and clear priorities. Just the statistics on that, it's 29% neutral on the first one and 28% neutral on the second. That would again move it into 86% and 87% respectively if we were to include the neutral figures. And we can ask an additional question on employees next year for clarity. With regard to Councillor Fletcher and determining how well we fit across other organisations, there's something called the Net Promoter Score, which is something we haven't included in our surveys for the last 2 years, but we intend to include next year. And the Net Promoter Score means you can balance yourself or benchmark yourself against numerous organisations, not just local government, because many organisations have questionnaires of this kind and include a Net Promoter Score. Okay, so that's our intention next year. With regard to the point that Councillor Lally mentioned, it's quite possible that we could ask a series of questions, 3 or 4 questions about councillors, whether employees feel that councillors offer effective leadership or whether councillors offer some other. So we could perhaps. We can certainly include some additional questions in the survey for next year.
That'd be really good, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, going to move on to the next item, which is item 6, the performance management review of business plan progress, pages 73 to 78. That is also a note and report.
Chair, sorry, just before you move on, could I just ask members to use their microphones, and then that way the live stream will pick up your comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Ruth, is this your item number?
I'll just
6? Thank you.
say 1 or 2 words.
Okay.
I'm afraid the page 77, there are 3 red dots. Our absence figures at the moment are higher than we would ideally like them to be. Although COVID is referred to in the top line, even taking that into account, and we do have a number of employees who have suffered from COVID and who have indeed been affected by long COVID. We do have a number who are on long-term sickness absence, and that has affected that top figure in particular. However, the number of such individuals has reduced relatively recently from 14 to 10. So we are going in the right direction. All of those employees have been referred to the occupational health physician. So we are getting all the advice and help we need, and they are too in relation to their absence. On the disability indicator at the top of page 78, we are going in the right direction with that indicator to ensure that we are an organisation that people with disabilities want to work for, but I think we're not quite meeting our target yet, but we are still making progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ruth. Any questions or comment on the report as a whole? Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on page 77, the second row, it says short-term mental health illnesses have increased. Do you have any more insight into that, Ruth? Any trends or reasons? Short-term, I would imagine it's things like stress-related issues, because it's quite a worrying trend if it's going to carry on going up.
Chair, I'll ask Aaron if he could perhaps comment on that. He's got more detailed information.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so like you say, there's a wide range of issues there. So some of it has been COVID related, some of it has been related to lockdown or caring responsibilities. Clearly, there's always going to be a few cases of work related stress, and I think that's probably about it. But we ensure that all employees are supported through our employee assistance programme, which is Care First. So we offer free counselling for all those employees who want to take it up. We refer to occupational health. We explore other options such as redeployment, and try our best to support them that way.
Thank you. One more, okay.
Yeah, sorry, Aaron, do you have the figure then of how many people have gone on short-term sick due to mental health? I know, appreciate it says days, but do you have an actual figure of how many people?
I can get that for you.
Yeah, thank
Councillor Fletcher. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, that's noted. The next item is item number 7, which is also a noting report. It is the pay policy statement 22 to 23. Now, it's going to full council in March next year. Some members over time they have doubted why we have a personnel committee. Well, tonight we have a chance to see something that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to have. We can scrutinise it, have a look at it, and make our comments and observations on it. Ruth, do you want to make any... Sorry, Kevin. Kevin, do you want to make any introductions at all?
Yep, through you, Chair. Just a brief introduction. This is the usual report that, in the usual format, that comes before this committee each year, just prior to being submitted to full council. A change table has been provided for you, again, at Appendix 1, so that you can see the changes that have been made. Just 2 points to mention to members. On page 93, at the top of that page, further progress has been made in regards to the gender pay gap. So the mean is down a further 1.31% to 3.59 compared on to the previous year. And in the section 23, Foundation Living Wage, just to let members know that we found out, or rather it was published last week, so after this report was written, that the Foundation Living Wage was set at £9.90 for 2021-22. In the report, it indicates £9.80.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions or comments, please, on the report as a whole? Councillor Philippo.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, the fact that we've got a personnel committee doesn't mean that we're discussing this. It's going to go to council anyway. So even if we haven't got a personnel committee, we would have been discussing it at council. All it means now is we're going to be discussing it twice, but never mind. It's just interesting to note that the gender pay gap is reversed in a way from the norm for full-time employees. We've got a minus 2.05%, and for part-time employees, it's minus 6.94%, which is just interesting to note. Mr. Powell mentioned the Foundation Living Wage being set at £9.90. I assume that we will be paying the Foundation Living Wage in the next financial year, will we?
Kevin, can you confirm that, please?
I can confirm that this year, after the pay award, if it's accepted at 1.75%, the base wage for the council is £9.79, so it won't meet the £9.90 Foundation Living Wage, and of course that will be the same next year. We won't be meeting the Foundation Living Wage based on the pay awards. I will be discussing the pay modelling with the Chair and Vice Chair in a week's time.
That's in a week's, yeah.
So the short answer then, Chairman, I think was no. Do we know at this point how much it would cost if we were to implement the Foundation Living Wage in full at the £9.90.
Do you have any figures on that yet, Kevin? Can we extrapolate?
Not to share with the committee
Okay.
right now, but
Okay.
I do have those figures, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chairman, the figures are available, but they're not available to members of the Personnel Committee that, in your opening remarks, are supposed to be discussing them. I'm a little lost there, I have to say.
Through you, Chair, there are so many combinations of models that can be extrapolated from the base data. And that needs to be considered first by Chair and Vice Chair, and those options need to be considered before we present the final one to members.
Okay, all right, so much for the Personnel Committee.
And we haven't had a chance to do that, Councillor Owen, yet. If there'd have been no Personnel Committee, that you'd have had no chance to scrutinise this whatsoever.
Gone to the Finance Committee or somewhere like that.
As a point of order, Chair, can we remind councillors that they're meant to wait to be called to speak and not just interject? Thank you.
Thank you. And that was a noted report. And we'll go on to the work programme, which is on pages 101 to 102. I'll move the recommendation from the Chair. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Any questions or comments on the work programme, please? No. That then, sorry, all those in favour? Any against? Or any abstentions? I think that's unanimous. Item 9 is the exclusion of public and press. I will move that from the Chair. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Wait, Jeremy, whilst the live stream is...
Yes, please, if you could just take that vote, Chair, and then we
Okay.
can
All
switch
those
off
in
the stream.
favour?